Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. This is a podcast dedicated to individuals wanting to have a successful accounting, bookkeeping, or tax business. The purpose of this podcast is to give you the tips and tricks, the means to actually market your services with confidence, to go out and through proven sales strategies, acquire the clients you deserve, to land the clients that you're wanting to and onboard them properly, retaining them with great relationships, offering quality services, in fact, becoming the premier accounting firm for them. As such, we refer to this as becoming a profit and growth expert. I implore you to take the time to register, subscribe for, follow this podcast, and listen to this and the other episodes that we have. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and for more than 20 years, I've been working with accounting professionals to help them have successful careers in accounting. As such, I've had the privilege of working with individuals that are interested in starting and building their accounting firm, and I've had the opportunity to work with them as they've gone about determining their pricing, their services, and more importantly, acquiring the clients that they've always wanted to work with to, in fact, have the premier accounting firm. As such, I encourage you to listen in and take notes of what it is we're going to be discussing today, because we have an amazing guest, someone that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. It is Andrew Hunzicker. And Andrew happens to actually been in accounting now for more than 30 years as an accountant, tax, and CFO and founder of many multi-million-dollar businesses, as well as a Big Four player. He is a seasoned professional within the industry for more than 5 years, and his goal is to actually help accounting professionals achieve balance in their daily lives, build thriving businesses, and cultivate the next generation of experts in this thriving industry. So, Andrew, welcome to the phone call.
Welcome. I'm really excited to be on here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. And one of the things that I want to do is just let our listeners know that this is going to be, I think, a unique conversation. So this is going to be fun. So why don't we go ahead and just have you, first of all, just start with a simple introduction of your background. What got you into accounting?
So it was, it's interesting. I went, my first round, I'll try to make this short, went to college in '86 and got a degree in finance, and just never could quite find the job that I wanted, just with that kind of vague finance degree. And when I was actually in my late 20s, I went back to just a community college and got the accounting that I didn't really want to do when I was younger, and absolutely loved it. And went back. I was a little bit older, and I had a goal. I wanted to get a job in Big Four, and I had a professor that said, "Look, Andrew, at your age to get into Big Four, you're going to have to nail the CPA exam." So I worked really hard for the first time in my life ever. I made straight A's working at night school. And I actually got the highest score in the state of Oklahoma on the CPA exam. And that resulted in offers at all the Big Four. And it was great. I went in the 90s into Price Waterhouse and kind of started my career from there. But it was a great learning process there as well, but really enjoyed even those very, very first years at the lowest staff level.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the accomplishment of not just passing the exam, but more importantly, getting the highest score there in the state. That in and of itself is an amazing accomplishment. So I'm sure there's many listeners who are very, very, not necessarily jealous, but definitely impressed by what that is. So well done there. It obviously opened a lot of doors. You went into the accounting industry, worked for the Big Four, and as you're working there, I'm sure you learned quite a bit. But when you left, where did you go? What did you do?
So when I left and by the way, my entire grade school, high school, college, I was never above a 3.2 or 3. So there's hope for all of us. If you apply yourself, you can do good on that. Was my one and only good exam in my life, but it was a key. So it was important, got me into that Big Four. And then, like many people, after your audit senior, I was an audit manager. What do? We go out into our clients. And so really almost the first day of this century, I think it was January 2nd of 2000, I took a CFO role at one of our oil and gas clients. I'd moved up to Oklahoma City by then. And I spent 10 years with that kind of a big family-run multi-entity oil and gas. In 2006, me and my boss founded a company, Forest Drilling, where and that was a first really big startup to exit. We exited that business in 2010 to Chesapeake Energy for quite a lot of money. And that's when I went on my own. I became a solo CFO, CPA, In 2010, I moved to where we vacationed, which was Bend, Oregon. I still live here today. It's an amazing place. And
Uh-huh.
I tell people, I teach people now, but I made every possible mistake you could make when I went out on my own, from marketing to sales to client service. And so I've got a lot of knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks.
Well, good. It's a good school to go to. Sometimes not too fun, but it does pay off. So, why start out on your own? You obviously had a successful career. Why not go just to another business? What led you to actually going out and becoming an entrepreneur?
So that is an interesting question. So in 2010, I didn't, to be honest, love the oil and gas industry, and I was in it for 10 years, and I was really getting just tired of that entire industry. Um, and when we did that pretty sizable exit, it allowed me, I got an opportunity. I was like, oh, okay, we can move somewhere to raise, I've got 3 boys, a place that we thought was better to raise a family. And so that was almost more of a family decision. And then when I got here, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I wanted to be a CFO, and I never really fit the mold of someone who wants to sit down from 8 to 5 in an office ever. That wasn't me. It was always hard for me. I was like, gosh, I work great, and I still today. I'm so productive from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. every morning, but then I may take 3 hours off. And so I just wanted to work for myself and get clients. And the very first thing, that 2 mistakes right off the bat, I moved to Bend, Oregon. There's only 80,000 people here, not, that many companies. And back then my mindset was, I can only serve people in this tiny little town,
Mm-hmm.
which nowadays I realize is not true. And also, I would brag about, I'm a master of all trades. I can serve anyone, manufacturing or retail or nonprofit or whatever. And the niche idea had never even crossed my mind. As a matter of fact, I paid someone a lot of money to tell me that, that Andrew, you should pick a niche and become an expert. And it's some of the best advice I ever got. But at the time, I didn't know it.
Well, there's a few things that you've touched on there, but let's go to the niche idea. Obviously, this is something that comes up quite often when it's addressing how a person should uh, basically strategically position themselves in their industry. And niching is a word that a lot of people just kind of flippantly throw around. They suggest that you do it. But you're right. A lot of people do put a lot of emphasis on it. You've embraced the idea, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you've chosen as your niche. But when you go back to that mentor, the person that you paid so much money to tell you that you should niche, what was the compelling reason that you actually then understood as to why you should consider it and then literally go ahead and identify a niche for yourself?
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, if you go back to the 80s and 90s and the first part of the century, whether it was the Big Four or whether it was solo CPA or solo bookkeeper on your own, we all served everybody. That's just what we did. Somebody along the way came along and figured out, hey, if you pick a niche, there's many, many benefits to picking a niche. But literally, the thought had never even crossed my mind. And when I saw actually an ad on Facebook, I clicked and met with this person who's now fairly famous. He's got a big program, but at the time, I was one of his first 10 members back in 2013. I paid him. My wife about killed me. She's like, who is this guy? He's way younger than you and less credentialed than you, and you paid him money. But I tell people, really, the only thing he taught me was, Andrew, pick a niche and become an expert. And it's been just the best advice ever. And just at a high level, why is that? Well, if you do pick a niche and become an expert, and I take that back. I've changed that. Pick a really good niche. There are niches that are not really good. I talked to many, many, many accountants on the phone, probably about half that say, Andrew, I picked this niche, salons or attorneys or whatever it is, and it didn't pan out. Here I am 8 months in. I want to start over. So make sure you put a lot of emphasis into picking that niche. But if you do become an expert in a great niche, what's going to happen? Well, there's 2 parts to all of our business. We have to find, if we're working for ourselves, which I assume you are, we have to find good clients, and then we have to serve them well. That's it. And so picking a niche and becoming an expert, it solves that finding great client problem, because by year 2 or 3, instead of finding great clients will find you. So that's great news for all of us that are introverted accountants and hate marketing. They'll find us. And then guess what? We're going to serve them better because we know so much about their industry. We're going to provide even more value than a generalist. And because of that, they're going to refer us to others and they're going to pay us more money. And then the icing on the cake is, since we're just doing the same thing for the same clients, it's easier. It's lower stress. It's just easier than jumping around different industries.
Well said. I like that. And you're actually right in so many ways, simply because when you identify a niche, you do need to identify one that has the capacity to fill your business needs. You can't pick something that's so narrow that there's only three businesses in the market that actually are in that niche. You got to pick something that has, at least some breadth. And the point is it's not just your local area. There's so much that can be accomplished now with the internet that you can have remote clients. But I liked what you were describing about the industry. There is an expertise once you learn the vocabulary of an industry. You start to understand the nuances of the industry that you're in, and they all of a sudden start to trust you more rather than just being compliant and providing financials. They start to actually find themselves interested in your opinion and advice simply because you know the industry so well. And then it allows you to go really deep into the industry by attending and participating in their conferences, their organizations, and really becoming quite influential in those places, not as their profession, but as the accountant or professional to their profession. So a lot of niche opportunities that present themselves when you choose to kind of specialize in that area. So you chose a very interesting niche.
Yeah.
Tell us which one it is and why you chose it.
So this is, again, like a lot of stuff I do, it's accidental. I just, we moved to Oregon because we thought it was a great place to raise a family, and which it is, and we love it here. I rock climb, and it's got lots of great rock climbing. But a side thing is, Oregon was one of the first states that went fully legal cannabis and CBD, and so we had a cannabis lab actually in town, and someone said, hey, they were doing due diligence and acquiring other labs and they needed some help, and someone referred them to me, and I just kind of fell into it. And I quickly realized this was a really unique niche. Even way back then, 5-6 years ago, when hardly any states were legal, I could see this was a very big growth industry. It was massively underserved by accountants, which is one of my key criteria of a good niche. And so, for example, I had picked the dental niche right before that. And dentists appear great on some metrics. They're multi-million, they're everywhere, in all big cities, small cities. But a negative to dentists is they're super hard to reach. They make themselves hard to reach, and they're overserved by already. It's you're a little bit late to the dentist game if you want to go into that. And I talked to lots of people that are quitting the dental industry. And so I just kind of fell into this one and really loved it from day one. Um, and I started looking around like, okay, how do I build my expertise in this niche? And there was actually very, very little information out there about this niche. There weren't chart of accounts. There weren't industry guides. The Big Four wasn't there. There wasn't a lot of trainings you could do. And so it was kind of the Wild West, and it still is a little bit. But I saw that there was tons of opportunities because there still today, this niche is vastly underserved by people that actually know what they're doing in the niche, have the tools and skills to serve it. So it's a great, great opportunity.
So there's a few things about this niche that you've identified that I think are quite interesting that our listeners will appreciate knowing, because whether or not they find themselves running into this opportunity or not, I'm sure they'll find it intriguing. One is, what's the difference between cannabis, CBD, and hemp?
Okay, and this is a great lead in. And so we just got off a call last week with AICPA. So I'm on the planning committee. The AICPA is the National Conference of CPAs. They're finally behind this industry, and they're putting on a huge 2-day conference in Las Vegas in November that I'm helping to plan and speak at. And actually, we just had this discussion that this is so big right now globally and in the US, it's not even a niche, it's an industry. And so
Correct.
within this industry, you've got, first of all, cannabis and hemp. Those are two plants that look identical, but the difference between a cannabis plant and the hemp plant is just the level of the chemical THC. So a hemp plant, by definition, has to have less than 0.3% THC, meaning if you go cut down that hemp plant and smoke it, you're not going to get high. But both cannabis plant and a hemp plant have CBD. hemp usually has a lot more CBD, which is yet another chemical in that plant that we've seen explode. 5 years ago, no one knew what CBD was. And in 2018, with the Farm Bill, hemp and CBD were pulled off Schedule 1. They're now federally legal, all 50 states. And so even though each of those niches of the cannabis plant or the hemp plant, they both have farming, they both have chemical processing, they both have product manufacturing, they both have labs, and they both have retail, even though they have the same sub niches underneath those industries, they're treated differently for tax. And so we've got to know how to look at the tax for each situation. So there's quite a bit of complexity. Both niches do take cost accounting. And so people sometimes like, oh gosh, I hated cost accounting in college or whatever. So it is kind of required, but that's a benefit. Those are the pain points, tax and cash flow for these business owners. And we show them, hey, how we can do this correctly and save them money, both running the business and on their tax return.
Perfect. Now, there is also another distinction, and you've used the term, but I think it's just been in passing. Share with the listeners the difference between a grower, a lab, and a dispensary.
Okay, so for all this, it starts with a plant. And so whether it's a hemp plant or a cannabis plant, and again, they look identical because they just have a different chemical makeup. So any plant you go out and look in your garden has hundreds of chemicals. But in a hemp and cannabis plant, two of those chemicals are THC and CBD. So it starts with farming. So this is a product that you grow in the farm. And so it might be an outdoor grow, it might be an indoor grow in a big city, in a big, huge building. And so once they grow that plant and harvest it over 180 days around there, then it ships off to even before the lab, it goes to the chemical processing plant. What do? They turn the plant into oil. Then what happens from that oil? Well, it could be sold to the dispensary, the retail chains that you see, like a coffee shop, but that sells marijuana. And actually, some of the flower will go straight to the retailer, but a lot of the flower will actually go to the processing plant where it'll be turned into oil. And then what is produced from that THC oil? All kinds of things: beverages, gummy bears, foods, lotions, all kinds of products. And then after the products, it has to go to the lab to be tested. And just like we test our bread or whatever, and you can look at a loaf of bread and find all the ingredients and how many proteins and whatnot, the lab's going to tell us exactly what the THC level and the CBD level is. And then when you get to the dispensary, you've probably seen them because they're in most states now and many cities. You go in there and you'll see all kinds of products. You can get the flour, you can get the raw oil, you can get gummy bears, you can get all kinds of things, lotions and whatnot. And so there's many, many products being sold at that dispensary level. And so those are all the sub niches, each with its own accounting quirks, every one of them.
Yeah, the last thing you said there is, I think, what's so important. My limited experience and exposure to this is that the growers, they're dealing with some nuances that are different than some of your traditional farmers. And as they're growing the fields and such, they're dealing with some unique accounting principles that we need to be sensitive to. And then when you get to the dispensary, you've got that retail front, and they're uniquely dealing with challenges, one of which is for a very long time, it's been a cash only type business. And so they've got cash restraints that are, when it comes to payroll or paying taxes and so forth, become much different than a traditional business because for a long time, in many instances, the banking industry, obviously with the FDIC, had issues regarding the monies coming in. You had merchant account issues where you couldn't take credit cards. And so there are a number of accounting issues that are unique to this industry. And I liked how you chose to actually say it's elevated beyond a niche to an industry, because it truly is. As it's becoming more and more legal, it's definitely becoming more and more standardized. So just from an accounting perspective, is there any little clarification you'd like to offer as to the nuances of this industry as it relates to accounting, maybe accounting or tax?
Yeah, so let's talk. So basically, in our program, we're going to teach in all 50 states. We want to have good GAAP cost accounting for all the sub niches. And by the way, some people, you wouldn't even sub niche specialize, like they're going to go cannabis as their broad industry, but then they're going to specialize in just dispensary accounting, or maybe some people specialize in farming. Those are the two big components. So if you look at GAAP accounting on the farm, and this applies to hemp, CBD, and cannabis, what does it cost to grow a pound of weed? That's the question. I love to ask that to business owners because they have no clue. You have to do cost accounting. So some farmers will say, well, it's free to grow a pound of weed because I just took this teeny little seed that I got for free and I put it in a 10-cent pot of dirt that I got in my garden and I grow it. But what the cost of that plant is over that 180 days, we're going to add all kinds of costs off our trial balance. We're going to take utilities, which can be very, very big on a farm, water and light and heat. And we're going to take direct labor, direct materials, indirect labor, all these farmers out there. We're going to allocate parts of their payroll into every single plant based on percent completion and estimated yields, rent, all kinds of expenses we're going to have to take and move them around. So you're typically, you say, okay, you're a bookkeeper and you pay rent at the farm, and you debit rent expense $1,000 and you credit cash or checking or whatever. But at the end of the month, to do cost accounting, it's kind of like a shell game. You got to move those costs around. So part of rent belongs in work in process, part of rent belongs in finished goods, part of rent belongs in cost of goods sold, and the remaining part of rent belongs in rent. And so we've got to play this game to figure out how do we move those parts around, and we got to do that for every single trial balance account on the P&L, or most of them, utilities, et cetera. And so it takes a little bit of effort to figure out what is the cost of those each individual plant. And it will also be affected by how many plants are growing. So if you had a farm that was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and they grew a single plant, the cost of that plant is going to be very high. But if you grew 10,000 plants, you can allocate those costs across many more plants as well. And by the way, all of these difficulties and complexities, you mentioned banking and cash, it depends if you're a glass half full or glass half empty. If you look at it the right way, it's a huge opportunity. They have this industry, these people are well funded, they have capital, they're multi-million-dollar companies, and they will pay for accounting and tax help and HR, and payroll and cash management. So there's some myths about banking. There is banking in the industry now. It's still hard to come by. But for example, in Oregon, MAPS Credit Union, there's 14 locations. They bank most of the cannabis here. But so they will often be able to find a bank account. But that said, there's tons of cash in the industry. Think casinos. And so we have to manage that. We do daily cash counts at the dispensary every day, and we tie it out to the POS system, and we reconcile that to the accounting system every single day. You might find $500,000 of cash in that dispensary. So it's a lot of cash, and it's just one more issue that we have to deal with.
So just for entertainment purposes, obviously this has kind of a seedy side to it, a darker side. You have an interesting convergence of the legalization of it, but at the same time, the black market or the illegal side of it.
Yes.
How does that, from an accounting perspective, in your experience, kind of go about? And give us a story to maybe illustrate it.
Well, okay, yeah, I've got plenty of these. So depending which part of the country, so obviously you've seen this, we're sweeping the country. I mean, I can't even keep up with the stats. You know, we had 5 new legal states at the last election in November. Since then, we've had New York and Virginia come on board. Yesterday, I think I saw Louisiana come on. So it's sweeping the country quickly. One other thought about the niche idea, this relates to this question. One of the huge benefits of the niche, you can focus on the whole nation. Since you're an expert, I can go get a client like I have in Hawaii or Texas, even though I'm in Oregon, because I'm an expert, and they'd rather have me in Oregon as opposed to someone in Austin, Texas that doesn't know anything about cannabis. So how this relates to this question is, if you come into this, I'm going to say, yes, spread your wings. Like, get some clients in the very, very old markets of California or Colorado. Get some clients or focus on your home state, but then focus on the hot new states like Illinois, Michigan, Massachusetts. New York's going to be huge, but it's still very new. It'll take a while to get up to speed. But when you bring up the illegal markets, the further west you go, the more issues you're going to have. So California and Oregon, where I am, you're going to have growers here that have been growing illegally for 30 years. And then you're going to have other people that have been growing illegally and they're trying to move into the legal markets, which I think is smart. It's kind of like when we went through prohibition with alcohol 100 years ago. Probably for 20 years, you still had a lot of bootleggers, but here we are today. How many of us buy alcohol from a bootlegger? Probably very few of us. So we're going to be dealing with these, but what you're going to see is, say you were targeting clients in Illinois, which is a huge market, by the way. Illinois, they don't have the legacy anywhere close to, say, California or Oregon of old illegal growers trying to convert. So you're going to find lots of companies founded by rich people that have $5-10 million that want to found a farm or whatever, and so you'll have less of the illegal issues. Now, if you land a client in California, you want to make darn sure they're not in the illegal markets. We put in our engagement letters, we're doing everything by the book. If we find out you have even a hint of doing something illegally, we're going to be out of there. Early on, I helped a well-known, I won't say his name, very famous billionaire from New York City. He was in clothing, and you would know his name. He had a son who was into music, and his son talked him into putting $10 million into a Las Vegas dispensary. And he came to me to help him get his money out because these people were criminals. He put in $10 million for 50% ownership in this dispensary. And guess who owned the other 50%? These people out of Chicago that were tied to the mob. And they were literally loading up U-Haul trucks in Las Vegas with cash and driving it to Chicago and filtering it through the garbage business to launder it. And so there are stories of this that, people that are kind of coming into the legal markets, but they're actually still trying to stay on the criminal side. As accountants, we want to stay far away from that. The business is so big that we don't have to go down that side of things.
I appreciate that. That clarification and that realization is so important. But I think at the same time, like you're describing, this is such an intriguing opportunity. It's a new industry. It's even though it's been around now for a number of years as it's been legalized from state to state, it's still new because there's so many nuances that are still evolving. And one of the things that I want to do here is just break away and pause and share that as part of this discussion, Andrew's been very kind that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the cannabis industry and such, you can go to the episode description. And in the description, you'll have there a link to actually schedule a time to speak with Andrew. And at the same time, if you mentioned this podcast, that you actually heard Andrew and I speaking about this, he will offer an hour of his time to actually help give you some counsel and advice to get off on the right foot. You can also follow Andrew and some of the things that he's sharing regarding all of this on Instagram. So if you happen to be involved in Instagram, you can go to the episode description and again, there find his channel to follow so you can actually get the latest and greatest from him as you're doing so. At the same time, I'd like to mention that in the episode description, you will actually find information about 2 books that are being offered by Universal Accounting. These are 2 as a promotion that every accounting professional should have in their library. It's 2 books that all accounting professionals should use to offer trusted strategic advisory services and get paid what they're worth. These are 2 books that are must-have additions to every library. One is called In the Black, 9 Principles to Make Your Business Profitable. The other is Red to Black in 30 Days, a small business accountant's guide to quick turnarounds. So make sure you go and take advantage of these special offers that are available in this podcast for you to receive today. Now, with all of that, there are also some additional free items, free resources that are for accounting professionals that I'd like you to take a look at. And again, in the episode description, the link to go find out more about those free resources is there for you to take advantage of. Now, Andrew, as I come back to you, there are a few quick things that I'd like to just kind of hit on. Is a lot of times people are wondering about how the accounting profession views all this. I mean, do you have to be a CPA? Do you lose your license if you start getting involved with these people? What kind of concerns can you quickly address that I might have if I'm a straight-lace on-board accountant and I'm wondering, do I want to get into this kind of an industry?
Yeah, that's a great point. So early on, there was a lot of fear, myself included. And so if you're a CPA, you need to check with your state board. almost all states at this point have addressed it that, yeah, if you're serving the state legal cannabis niche, you're not going to lose your license. At the end of the day, I say over the last, 7, 8 years that this has been legal, there's not a single CPA, not a single bookkeeper, enrolled agent, for that matter, an attorney, a plumber, electrician, serving this industry that's lost their license by just serving a state legal business. And so, but where we are today with the AICPA behind this, the big national firms, I mean, the Markhams, the Cohn-Resnicks, BDO, they are into cannabis. And I can guarantee you they vetted it very well with their attorneys and insurance people. So I think the risk is very, very low as in fact, we have very real possibility that cannabis will be federally legal this year. The MORE Act has been reintroduced in the House, which did pass in December. The Senate side, Schumer has said he is putting a standalone cannabis bill to come through. And so we think it's very likely what happened with CBD hemp. We just get new legislation and all of a sudden we'll be legal everywhere. So it could happen quickly.
So here's a question then, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because it's not something that we've discussed, but I'm going to assume that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ron Paul, a number of years ago, wrote a book, and in his book, he had a particular chapter that gave kind of an explanation of the history as to why there was this stigma that came on in the 1920s and 30s with marijuana, and at the same time, how it then led to the lobbying and the criminalization of it, and how it was then kicked both as cannabis and hemp out of the United States. Are you familiar with what I'm referring to?
My history didn't go quite so deep, but yeah, I know the history through the 60s and the 70s, and just even with it being lumped in with heroin and cocaine and all this crystal meth type of things that truly are pretty bad.
Actually, if you go back to the 20s and 30s, it really shows how through lobbying it was, as hemp, considered a competitor to cotton and so forth, and to lumber. And so it was through a lot of lobbying that it was then criminalized and actually kicked out of the United States as something that could be grown as a crop. So anyways, not to go down that whole path, my point is you're definitely seeing more or less this 180-degree turnaround to where it's very much accepted in society. It's very much used, and industrially, the hemp products are much more cost effective and robust in a lot of different places. But the accounting opportunities as these industries start to take off, clothing, manufacturing, and so forth, it's just going to be incredible as this industry really kind of gets more and more into the day-to-day products that we're using. And it's obviously got the medical component, but I think it has even more so a lot in the day-to-day use of clothing, textiles, and so forth. So the question I want to ask you is, in seeing this evolution, what kind of stigmas have you seen kind of fade away? Initially, I'm sure there was the boogeyman of sorts. Yeah. Where is it now in your mind? And give me a story that might illustrate that.
Yeah, and it really is fading away quickly. Whereas even 5 years ago, people were like, oh, I don't want to serve this. Everyone will think I'm crazy, this niche. And so you brought up a couple of good points. One is hemp outside. So the chemical of CBD and THC used for recreation medicine is one issue, but hemp alone is going to be just an insanely massive industry. They're using it for cement, clothing. It has so many uses. It's unbelievable that hemp was ever illegal because it couldn't get you high anyway. But it's just an incredibly useful plant. So you could just focus on hemp the rest of your life and be huge. But if you look at the cannabis and CBD side, first and foremost, 8 out of 10 Americans, all of us, or most of us, believe that medical cannabis should be legal. And when 8 out of 10 Americans agree on anything, wow, we don't agree on anything. So we're divided on everything. So when 8 out of 10 of us agree on something, it's truly amazing. But when you step back, it's like, well, first and foremost, the medicine side of it is enormous for whether it's CBD for your pets or THC, all the medical uses, finally, after decades, we're being allowed to research it globally. And so scientists, hospitals, universities are researching this for pain, arthritis, cancer, PTSD, sleep, anxiety, depression. I could go on and on and on. Humongous uses medically, and this is now being backed up by science. And so because of that, we have an opiate crisis in our country. As we're aging, all of us, we are going to need help with many of those issues. And so this real medicine, that's why 8 out of 10 of us believe in this. And that's why it's going to go federally legal. But then a side benefit of all that medical is it provides jobs. It provides huge tax dollars to our cities, counties, states, and feds that are all broke. It's COVID proof. It's recession proof. It's just a huge industry that makes sense on any way you look at it, whether it's the job front, the economic impact, the tax dollars, or just simply we need better medicine. So that's what's going to make it. And then hemp, you talk about totally outside that realm of just making all these products. So it just makes sense to the average person that has common sense. And so as that happens, that stigma starts to fall away. And even, I use my mom as an example. She's 85. She's as anti-cannabis as you could ever get. But her doctors prescribe CBD to her for arthritis. And she's starting to slowly see, oh, yeah, in her generation, the 70s and the 80s, when doctors were just prescribing pills and Valiums and all kinds of things for every ailment, that's not the answer. And so we're starting to see this maybe is a partial answer to some of those issues.
Very well said. Now, obviously, you hit the hemp, you hit the medicinal benefits of it. I'm curious, do you know the story behind the Charlotte version of marijuana?
Yeah, and that's the CBDCharlottes Web, and had the
That's right.
cured. And so there's many stories of people that, just anecdotally, so and so had autism and they started taking CBD or THC and just got completely turned around. But luckily, not even just anecdotes anymore. They're getting, so many uses. So you could get a narrow use, like say epilepsy. Not a lot of us have epilepsy, but
yes,
they're finding uses for it in
correct.
Epilepsy or autism. So it's just a really. But one doctor on an interview was talking about the really big three are anxiety, sleep, and pain.
Yes,
those are biggies.
Yes, those are the three benefits that typically are addressed with the THC. Or not with the THC, but with the medicinal use of it. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to summarize some of the things that we've discussed here briefly, and then come back to you for just a closing thought and see what your final thoughts might be for this. But before I do that, let me just go ahead and share quickly just the plug for you to go as a listener to the episode description and take advantage of these different offerings that are included in today's episode. There you'll have access to Andrew and some more information that would be beneficial if you'd like to speak with him and learn more about the industry of cannabis and the opportunities for this as an accounting professional, but also take advantage of those two books that were mentioned, In the Black and Read the Black, two excellent additions to your library as an accounting professional as to how you can actually work with your clients more from an advisor or coach and help them in their business, specifically going from red to black, the cash flow guide that you need as an accounting professional to help businesses with the most challenging problem that they most often face. Now, with this, also just take advantage of the link there to the other free resources and see what it is that you can take advantage of as you're running your accounting business. Now, as a summary of today's discussion, one of the things that I really appreciate about Andrew is with all the success that he had in the corporate world and obviously did a great exit, he found the opportunity to finally tap into something that was more of interest, which was being entrepreneurial, not working the 8 to 5, but finding something that could leverage his skills and experience later in his career. And he started his business. And through that, the various challenges came in, marketing, sales, being the jack of all trades. And through some good advice, and as many of us keep continuing to hear, this opportunity to niche, chose an industry, and in doing so chose to actually go deep, and in doing that actually specialize. And he's learned the industry, the nuances of it. He's watched this particular industry regarding cannabis evolve from being illegal to legal, and he's been able to witness that evolution and be a part of it and actually start to identify some of the key accounting principles that are necessary, whether it be at the grower level with the farmers, the dispensary side with the retail, and address some of these issues all the way down to the cost accountings, creating the chart of accounts, and obviously meeting the business owner's needs as they're navigating these things, just basically as a new frontier, if you will. It's kind of the Wild West, as he was describing earlier, as you go further west. So lots of opportunities as states legalize more and more of this industry. You're going to find greater opportunities as entrepreneurs go into that field and start opening up shops and operations. It's our chance to actually go in as accounting professionals and help service their accounting needs. So as you consider this as an opportunity, definitely weigh the opportunities and consider where you want to go from here. But Andrew, what are some closing thoughts that you might have for our listeners?
Yeah, this is a great niche and industry to come into right now. The one closing thought, I talk to a lot of accountants that work for yourselves. We all business owners, and I want you to be a business owner, not a freelancer, has to invest in their assets. Luckily for us, we don't need real estate and we don't need inventory and fixed assets and all those kinds of things. But what we have is our one and only asset are our knowledge, skills, and tools. So be investing in that, whether you're listening to a great podcast like this or reading a book or taking a program or a college course. Invest in yourself every day, week, month, and year, and invest, part of your revenues. It's very important. I talk to too many people like, oh, what's this cost? What's that cost? Instead of that, you should say, what's the investment? What's the ROI? Invest in yourself. You have one asset, so invest in it, and you will grow a successful business.
Amen, amen, amen. Could agree with you more. It's a business. Treat it like such. And you are one of the biggest assets in the business. So you definitely need to be investing in yourself, staying appraised of the new things going on in the industry, which is our accounting profession, and basically staying relevant. There's technologies with various things happening that you need to be aware of. Well said. I like that, Andrew. So here's what I'm going to do to wrap this up. I'm going to encourage you to listen to our other episodes. We have numerous ones out there to help you, in fact, become the premier accounting firm in your area. Be sure to subscribe to this, and in doing so, be notified of the various episodes as they're released. And last of all, for more information on how you can apply these principles in your business and, in fact, become a profit and growth expert, the premier accounting firm in your area, visit us at universalaccountingschool.com, or you can give us a phone call at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care and have a great day.